In this video, we're going to look at proportional reasoning with driving tables. Use the information below to find the missing values. You may solve it by any method. Assume each table is a direct variation. Remember, a direct variation means it is proportional, meaning the slope is equal to y over x, and that the y-intercept is at 0, 0. Remember, when you write points, it's always x comma y. So let's look at our first problem. We have time in hours, that's our x idea, and distance in miles, that's our y idea. And we see here that for 2 hours, we were driven 104 miles. At 3 hours, we were driven 156 miles. The question they're asking is, what would be 7 miles? So how can we figure that out? Take a moment and try to solve that on your own. Otherwise, we see in 1 hour, there we go from 104 to 156. So how many miles is it from 104 to 156? Well, we simply have to subtract those two numbers. 156 minus 104 is 52. So we go 52 miles in 1 hour, and that means we go 52 miles per hour. Knowing that we go 52 miles an hour, then take a moment and see if you can figure out what 7 hours would be. Otherwise, here's that answer. One method is just to continue adding 52 to each thing, since it's 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours. So at 4 hours, we see it's 208, 5 hours, 360, 6 hours, 312, 7 hours would be 364. Notice I'm adding 52 each time to my miles because I'm adding 1 hour each time, right? 52 miles per 1 hour. So since these are counting by ones, that's why I'm counting by 52s. If I was counting by twos, then I'd have to count by 104s each time because it's 52 miles every 1 hour. So be aware of that proportionality. Remember also, if I go backwards, I'm going to have to subtract 52 then, since I'm counting backwards by ones. Remember, at time 0, my distance should be 0 because it's a direct variation. The y-intercept at 0, 0 because all direct variations have a y-intercept at 0, 0. If x is 0, your y should be 0. Notice also when x is 1, your y answer is your slope, so 52 is my slope. Another thing to note is direct variations are proportional, which means if I take y divided by x, that should be my slope. 104 divided by 2 is 52. 156 divided by 3, 52. 204 divided by 4, 52. In a direct variation, if you take 156 divided by 3, that answer should be the same number for all of them in a direct variation. That's always true. Y divided by the x will always give you your slope in a direct variation. Now, another way we could have found my answer once I figured out I was counting by 52 is just take 52 times 7. While that's true and we can do that, we're trying to work on this understanding of this extension, of this proportionality, and we'll see some more examples of that on our next example. So let's look at example 2. My time in hours at 2 hours is 80, at 3 hours is 120. My question then is, how much would it be at 10 hours? How many miles would that be? Take a moment to solve that problem. Otherwise, we could take 80 divided by 2 and get 40. Same thing, 120 divided by 3 is 40. We could use the 40 to get to 1 to the 10. However, an easier way to do that is simply doing this. If I want to go from 2 to 10, I can multiply that by 5. If I do that on the left side and you do it on the right side, to stay consistent. So what is 80 times 5? That would be 400 miles. So this time, instead of dividing and then multiplying, notice I just multiplied, making my answer a little fancier. So at 10 hours, my answer would be 400 miles. This is part of that proportionality, keeping the same proportion, the same ratio. And again, if I had wanted to, I could have done 80 divided by 2, which would have given me 40 miles per hour, right, miles per hour, and then use the 40 miles times 10 to give me 400. So again, another way to solve that as well. Now let's take a look at number 3. We have time of 2 hours is 80, 3 hours is 120. This time I want to get to 18 hours. Take a moment to try to solve that problem. Otherwise, here is that answer. There are again multiple ways to solve this. Any which way is fine as long as you can get the answer. We're working on chunking, so let's try to use the 2 or the 3 to get to 18. I can go from 2 hours to 18 hours by multiplying that by 9. 2 times 9 is 18, therefore 80 times 9 would give me my answer at 18 hours, which is 720 miles. Another way we could have done it is to go from 3 to 18 means I'm going to multiply by 6. That means I'm also going to do 120 times 6, and that still gives me 720. Or like before, I already know that 80 divided by 2 is 40, so 40 times 18 is 720 miles. Again, 40 times 18, if you're doing this stuff in your head, not as easy to do as just going 80 times 9 is 720. But any of those methods work. So let's take a look at the next problems. Number 4, we have 2 hours is 80 miles, 3 hours is 120. Now we want to get to 13 hours. Take a few moments and try that. Otherwise, here's one of the methods. My goal is to get to 13 hours. So how could I use a 2 and or a 3 to somehow get to 13? Well, one of the things I could do is this. I could say 13 hours is equal to 5 times 2 hours plus 3 hours. 5 times 2 hours would be 10 hours, and then plus 3 gives me 13. From here, I can substitute in my known values. 2 hours is 80. This will give me 5 times 80. The 3 hours is 120, so I'm going to say plus 120. Now we have 5 times 80 miles plus 120 miles. Well, 5 times 80 miles is 400 miles. Plus 120 miles gives me 520 miles. So 13 hours is 520 miles. That's one way you could do it. Again, as long as you can get the answer, that's what matters. On number 5, here we have 3 hours is 126 miles, 5 hours is 210 miles. See if you can figure out how many miles you travel in 14 hours then. And pause the video, or here's the answer to that. This is a similar approach. 14 hours would be 3 times 3 is 9, plus 5 hours would give me 14. So again, now I'm going to substitute in how many miles is 3 hours. That's 126. This gives me an equation of 3 times 126 miles plus 5 hours is 210 miles. So I put that in place of 5 hours as 210 miles. So now we have 3 times 126 plus 210. And that answer is 588 miles. Again, this is just one approach. You could have tried to extend the table. You could have used 210 divided by 5 to get your miles per hour, and then figured that miles per hour times 14 should still give you 588. Lots of different ways to approach this. This is just one way. Now let's take a look at the next problem. Solve 12 hours in at least 3 different ways using the following information. 2 hours is 80 miles, 3 hours is 120. You want to get to 12 hours. Try to come up with at least 3 different ways to solve that. Now that I've given you enough time, because you paused it, here are 3 different ways you could approach it. You see, one way is I can take 6 times 2 hours, so 6 times 80 miles is 480 miles. We could do 4 times 3 hours, so 4 times 120 miles is 480 miles. We could take the 80 miles divided by 2 hours, or we could do the 120 miles divided by 3 hours. Both of them give me 40 miles an hour. 1 hour is equal to 40 miles, so if I want to go from 1 hour to 12, I'm going to multiply it by 12, which means 12 times 40 miles would be 480 miles to get 12 hours. These are 3 methods. There's many others out there that you could do. Again, we're trying to use this proportionality idea to solve these problems as we move forward. Understanding ratios and how I can manipulate ratios will help you solve a lot of direct variation and linear problems. which we encounter a lot of in life.